Okay, hey y'all, it's your girl Sia, and I'm back with another video. Y'all, really quick, one time for the books, I need y'all to understand something. Appellate courts do not work the same as a trial court. And I only know this because I went through this myself. Let's get into it. First off's first, you guys, if you guys haven't, subscribed or liked or left your comment down below, please go ahead and do. I really appreciate it. But that being said, I wanted to go into what I wanted to discuss. So it's a lot of people. This part of the reason why I don't talk about politics and I only speak on feelings is because I don't know what's true and what's not true. Okay. And I only say this is because you have so many people reporting on things that are not true that it's very difficult to tell what is true. Okay. With that being said, I only have my own personal experience to really go off of. Okay. And I can tell you guys now, an appeal or request for an appeal is not quite the same as going to trial for the first time and then being found guilty. The things that the judge is looking for is going to be a little different than what the initial judge was looking for. And all the appellate court is really going to do is review the work of the initial judge and make sure that the stuff was correct and justified so that this circumstance could be what it was. Okay. And when I say that, I need people to really understand this is not a retrial. They're not retrying anything. This is not, hey, let's go ahead and resubmit. The entire case for the new judge to look at to determine whether or not Carmelo Anthony is guilty or not. So that's number one. I think a lot of people have that misconstrued, and that's a problem when we're talking about narrative. And I think that when we're dealing with certain content creators, they just need to be mindful of that. Because when we're covering this story, you're losing people in certain aspects because of the fact that you don't really understand how this works, right? And a lot of people are going to come out looking kind of crazy because they don't quite understand how this works, okay? With that being said, you do, if you guys are reading this case, and I'm not quite, I'm gonna be real. I don't agree with what happened, okay? But I'm not the type to follow this case bit by bit. I feel like this, if he gets out and they determine that he's not guilty, then he's out, and by the grace of God, like God will deal with that circumstance. That's really how I see it, especially when people are innocent. This is just my personal experience in life. When you're innocent, God is going to look out for you, right? Even if you got to go through the mud, right? Because sometimes that's part of somebody building somebody's character. You understand what I'm saying? So this may be a way, perhaps. I'm not saying that it's the best way, but it's not my job to intervene, and me personally, with whatever's going on in that dynamic. And the only reason why I say that is because it's hard to tell whether or not this circumstance is going to destroy this young man or if it's going to, sharpen iron with iron, right? Do I agree with what happened? No. Do I think what happened was crappy? Yes. Do I think that at that age, if that something like that happened to me, I don't know how. I'm gonna tell you now, I've been through a lot of stuff, but I just don't know how that would have sat with me. With that being said, I also know that as a youth, and when I say youth, I'm not talking about 18, I'm talking about much younger. I was kind of prepared for a certain kind of lifestyle, if that makes sense. And so I don't know how I would have took it, right? I just know that looking at this dynamic and looking at what happened to this person, I could only put myself in their shoes and imagine how that could turn out for me or my kid or whatever, my child. I probably shouldn't say kid, but you guys get what I'm saying. Um, However that turns out, right? I would not agree with it either way. And I don't agree with it even if, you know, I I could see if the young man really went out with the intention, like, to do all these things. But the reality of the circumstances, nobody really can quite determine the intention of the person in this case, especially with seeing the video. I don't have any footage that would determine that the intent was to harm, right? Um, and so I don't believe that this case was really based on intent, despite people trying to assume the intent. Okay. With that being said, um, I really try not to. I'm really not the type to follow cases like this. It's just not my thing. However, shout out to those who do. With that being said, okay, you have the appellate court. I've already told you guys what their goal is really to make sure that none of the technical processes, right? So when we talk about whether or not the judge did his job. So let me back up. Y'all do know his request for relief occurred before the Carmelo Anthony trial. Okay. Now, it's interesting because I know people are using that as a way to kind of discredit the judge. And you guys know I've had my own, doings with my own fair experiences with judges where I'm like, this judge ain't shit, right? But I also think that there are laws that people are not aware of that how can I say this? That can make a trial appear to be unfair, if that makes sense. So in during litigation, in my experience, okay, it was almost like the judge was telling the lawyer how to build their fucking case. Okay. When you're dealing with certain circumstances like this, right? There were certain things and where the lawyer felt like, okay, I won on this, right? I got, I feel like, I won her on this. I beat her on this. So now I'm gonna ask the judge to what's the word, exclude certain pieces of information that may make the defense's case a little stronger, right? And how they pose it is, let me think. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to get, I wish I just had it on the tip of my tongue. There's an argument that they can either argue, okay, the information you're given is fraud, like it's not valid, it's fake, it's made up, so I don't want to even enter this into court in order to ensure that I get a fair trial, is really the argument. So there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that are done. I remember when I was going through this litigation, even when I felt like I was right, and even, whatever, because we're not about to rehash that. But there was a lot of paperwork involved. And the problem is any technicality. So it's like this. I had the grace in certain areas where the judge was kind of, I it felt like, and the judge could easily been the completely opposite way based on paperwork, but it felt like the judge was kind of seeing it from my point of view. Okay. However, then that's a bias. That's just me, reading people and reading what took place, right? But at the same time, legally, I didn't know what the hell I was doing on paper. For real, for real. I was just trying to mimic whatever I was seeing take place. And there came a point where the argument became, okay, because I messed up on this, and this, and stupid shit, right? Shit that I'd be like, really, like, if we're gonna talk about like my life, bro. this is what we're arguing about because I didn't label this document this and not that. But the crazy thing is, even in my resource search, that is a thing. So if you get a judge that is super, like, let's say for example, super against you, right? And you forget to do whatever the technicality portion of things is, the judge can, it's within their scope, I guess, to go to the extreme one way or the other, if that makes sense. So part of litigation, and I'm literally saying this from an experience, is paperwork. Okay. And then hoping that you're on a side of a judge, and sometimes you can't tell, right? You don't know. So if I'm on a good side of a judge, okay, the judge might be lenient in the sense that, okay, this document was labeled 5, but not letter A, and it should have been labeled A instead of 5, right? Something stupid like that. These are real things in the court of law. Okay, these things really do make up a case. Okay, they really do make up a case, despite the fact that that has no relevance, in my opinion, as to what happened. Okay, but that is a thing. Okay, so when you have the appellate court coming in, they're saying, okay, hey, look, this was done wrong, and but they're doing it on the basis that there was a technicality. Technicality is paperwork. It's because really the argument, okay, he didn't get the right to a fair trial, all these things, but it's things that were done on paper. These aren't things. So like I hear people saying things, oh well, they hand delivered the paperwork. They hand delivered. Yeah, we all know that that's some bullshit, right? We can say we hand delivered, but that's the right. Like that's everybody's right. I have the right to go hand deliver some paperwork. I go file today to my daughter's father's house, right? And the courts are trusting me based off the word of good faith, right? That I did what I said I was going to do. It's on my daughter's father, for example. Not saying that that's the case, but I'm just giving you guys an example to provide the burden of proof that I didn't do it. Do you get what I'm saying? So, depending on the judge is within the scope of reason to say, well, yeah, she did it, and just go along with it. Some judges may, I don't know, but I would think that that would be something, that you would kind of look at and be like, okay. But based on the story, you could tell, like, I don't know, we didn't get into psychology here. But unfortunately, things like that do not matter the way that I think people think they should matter. And they should matter. And to judges, some judges they matter, and to some judges they don't. In some cases they matter, in some cases they don't. And not all the time is the judge focused on the fact that these documents were not hand delivered, because how do you prove that? It's on the person, on certain people, to prove that. That's in the burden of proof. You guys got to also realize that. If I'm a plaintiff and my people hand delivered their documents, it's not my job to argue that they did not. It's on the defense to prove that I did not. And if the defense cannot prove it, well, that's, that argument becomes null and void, regardless if I hand delivered it or not. I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the benefit of the hand delivery. I'm learning this. This was my experience, right? And this is really how it goes down. So I want to be clear about something, you guys. There's a difference in technicality and reality. And the technicalities of the law say one thing, And the scope of each thing is kind of broad in comparison to like what we think would be like cut and dry. Okay. Right or wrong is kind of irrelevant. It really is. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but let's say you're right on a lot of shit and your attorney messes up. Hey, you could lose a lot. And in your mind, you're sitting here like, what the fuck? But a good judge is going to tell you to let go of that attorney before before anything goes down. Really, they're going to let you know, like they're going to address the lawyer. I've seen it happen. I've been in that experience. So I really feel like this, man. Unfortunately, the goal is to never get into this point. And I don't know what transpired. There's a lot of finger pointing, and I'm not about to go back and rewind time. Like, I feel like there's enough people to do that, okay? To tell you guys exactly where the family went wrong or exactly where the defense went wrong. But there have been a lot of times in my situation, and I'm not saying this from a negative aspect. I'm saying this because I've paid for attorneys that did their job, and I've also paid for attorneys that in my head they didn't do their job. And then I was also the one doing the job. You understand what I'm saying? So I've had experiences of all three. And in this situation, this was a dynamic in which, sure, could we say the attorney could have said more? Sure. But a lot of people don't realize what's said in court is not necessarily the whole case. It's not like the case is being fought by paper. So when folks are like, well, I'm not going to read this document and they're just repeating cases, and that's the shit you want to know because that's what's going to tell you what's really going on with the case and why he's behind bars. Now you could try to sit here and try to piece together what you saw. And y'all know I've done my fair share and my take on what I saw. I don't believe he did what he was well, hold on. I don't believe the video really shows him doing what they said he was doing. I seen one video where he was like, I done it, but the problem is by that time, there's probably so many people that assume that he had did it, that he assumes he did it. I mean, I feel like I don't feel like that video is enough. I feel like he was unjustly, put behind bars. But the reality of it is, what happened on paper matters. And it matters a lot more than what happened in court, especially because we've seen what happened in court. Right. So the questions we should be asking is not, okay, I know a lot of people assume that the defense did nothing he could. Nothing, excuse me, he did nothing, right? And in a lot of instances, that could be the case, right? But you've also got to look at the motions that were filed, the things that were filed, right? So what did the prosecutor file, right? What did the defense file in regards to that, and what was the judge's response? The meat and the potatoes, to be quite frank, is in those documents. You will understand why. Once you understand the things that the prosecutor may have asked for, right? They're always going to give you a reason why in those documents, right? And then you've got to read, not assume, but read the defense's response. Then you have to read the judge's response. Otherwise, you're not really going to understand why a case happens the way it happens. I'm not saying this happened the right way or the wrong way. I hope that for Karmelo's sake, again, with me being in his shoes, my hope for him is that he has some good attorneys that find a way out. But at this point, I don't know, right? He's going to have to wait. He's going to have to go through this process. The judge, the appellate court is going to review the technical work of the court below it. And I say technical because it's not quite the same as did you do it or did you not do it. Those are two different conversations to some degree. Okay. The appellate court is going to be looking for errors, real errors, like within law. Not like errors like how you're thinking, like, how could you? He's a little like, how could you? This is why the one of the things the appellate court is Carmelo Anthony's attorneys is fighting is the fact that he didn't have the right to an open court, fair court, right? Mm, okay. Well, we got to prove that. Okay. So I just want you guys to understand I've said this time and time again. His case may not go the way people think it will go. And there's a lot of people, and again, I hate to say this because if I was on the other end, I would want people to never forget about me. Like, especially if I know that what I'm saying is what God saw, and this is what God is going to do. But I also know that God works in magical ways. And sometimes it ain't about rescuing somebody from what they about to go through. Sometimes they got to go through that in order to grow through that, to become the best version of themselves. This is why you see kids, young children, going through tough experiences at an age where you're like, man, we can't even blame you for what you're going through because God has already ordained a purpose for that child. And at some point, don't get it twisted. I remember when I was a kid, I had the choice. I was able, especially when I was free, like when I didn't have no parents. I had the choice. I had the choice. And I kind of knew right from wrong, but I didn't quite understand the magnitude of my choices because I was young. You understand what I'm saying? So God gave me levels of grace. You get what I'm saying? Meaning that in the event that Carmelo, this is exactly what we think it is, right? God will find a way to not only protect him, but to help him to excel further down the line. Whatever he's got to deal with in these times is between him and God. But I promise you that 35 years in the event, that the story that we believe that most people are like, yo, this something's not right about this. He ain't about to do all them years. He ain't. That's not how God works. He may have to sit down. I don't know, I'm not him. I don't know what that's about. But in solitude, he's gonna figure that out if he's smart enough. He'll figure it out. And sometimes it don't mean he's a bad person. It just means shit, God needs you to sit down for a second. And he needs you to maintain faith throughout the process. So I do believe this while the story is kind of dwindling. Okay. I don't believe the people. I believe that there are gonna be people that will keep up with him because that's how the world works. But I personally am moving on with my life. Like I ain't about to be stuck. I mean, I'm aware of what happened, right? It's noted in my brain. I wish the best. My prayers go out for Carmelo Anthony. Not really to his family, but to him, because that's who needs it. However, I don't have the time or the capacity to keep up with the story. Like I'm an investigator type stuff. I ain't got time for that. And I feel like as time goes by, you're going to see more and more people move forward because there's so many more things happening right now that are much more important, right? Not saying he's not important, right? So I just I've been rewatching some videos and people commenting on Carmelo. Let me tell y'all something. Y'all would do yourselves for the commentators out there. If you're gonna speak on the topic, you're gonna do yourself a service by reading the paperwork. I don't care how many documents it is. You need to read the paperwork. And you need to read it till you understand both arguments, because the problem is we're putting information out there and is very much one-sided. And I say that because it's like a lot of this may be news to y'all, but it ain't news to the courts, right? So the prosecutor could have filed a document, right? Because this story has been old, it's old. The fact that people are coming on to it now is because the trial is now. But I learned about this a few years back. Okay. So you're dealing with the circumstance. These people are going and they're 9 times out of 10 fighting and negotiating back and forth the whole time. Right. A lot of time. It ain't like, okay, he's bonded out, he's good, he's at home, and they go to crime and they're dealing with crime and stuff. They don't have to deal with it till they go to court. They've been dealing with it the entire time. So we're missing a glimpse of the last few years that have gone by in which this fool had been on, waiting for trial. That's where you want to get your information from. So if you're not reading these documents, you're not going off of nothing else other than your emotions, is my point. Is my point. And that's okay. But just don't come on live talking about, oh, I'm just going off, I read these documents, but I didn't read everything. No. If you're going to speak on it, speak on it. If you're going to spend 2 hours talk about it. But make sure you know what the fuck you talking about. Make sure you understand, especially with race tensions being so high right now. I don't hear many people talking about this aspect. They probably really don't know that exists, but it does. There's there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things in court. I'm not saying folks did things right or wrong. I'm just saying we need to be very much aware of how these things work before we go online and we're talking about, oh, well, the defense said this and the defense said that, and they did this to him, y'all, and they did that to him. Well, you don't quite know that to be true. The defense can say whatever the fuck they want to say, just like the prosecutor can say whatever the fuck they want to say. To be quite frank, the prosecutor can make a whole story about they ass if they wanted to, just like the defense can. So if I'm the defense, of course, I'm your defense team. I'm gonna be arguing the fact that, man, this is a mistrial. They didn't give him a fair case. Like, of course, certain things, of course, I would be fighting for. That's common sense. But even then, if the appellate court decides this is a mistrial, he gonna have to go through the same process all over again. Y'all get what I'm saying? It's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna be a bunch of paperwork being filed back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until the day of court. And if they file certain things like an injunction or, if the judge agrees, folks can't bring certain up. They're going to have to find ways to prove their point, because sometimes that's a penalty as a result of not following what you're supposed to do in court. Technically, these are technical. This is more technical than right or wrong at this point. So I just want to put that out there. You guys need to really understand what's happening right now. This ain't even about the argument at this point is not right or wrong. It's about, hey, was there an error made? And if so, can you prove it? And if you can prove it, we'll give you what you want. And just dumbing it down for y'all. So this ain't an argument about Carmelo's character. It ain't an argument about whether he did what he did or did not do. This is about whether or not the legal people all around in the entire situation did what they were supposed to do legally, paperwork wise. So, my thoughts are, and this is just me concluding this video, you got to understand you're dealing with people who clearly know the system. You're dealing with a judge, a judge. And while I'm not saying that judges are correct or 100% right, I do and would assume, and I hate assuming, but you don't just become a judge because you don't know how things operate, right? I just, I don't know. Like, I feel like people are really not taking in what we're saying or the magnitude of what's being said, right? Or really understanding the magnitude of the next steps that are happening. Okay. I'm going to say two things actually. In my opinion, a judge doesn't just become a judge because he don't know nothing. A judge or she, black or white, because they got all types, right? Does not become a judge because they're ignorant to what their job is. Do you understand what I'm saying? I know this is hard for some of y'all if y'all trying to pinpoint where I'm going. Just saying. A judge is not a job you just scam your way through, bro. That's a job, I would think, that you genuinely have to be qualified for, like a fact. Like it wouldn't matter. But remember the scope in which I told you that judges have room to allow certain things. So if you irritate a judge and that judge is moving the way they want to move, you might not get a best outcome in certain areas because they have scope. It's not a simple thing as, okay, well, I did this, so you gotta do this. A judge has a spectrum. So that's why they tell you, like, if you, for example, if you go to court, let's say you committed a crime, right? And then they tell you, well, this crime may, may result in, 20 years and maybe $1,000 fine. But then you go to court and you realize, oh shit, well, I didn't have no 20 years at all. I had a month's probation and a $5 fine type shit. It's because their scope in their decision making, they don't have to say, okay, well, you did this, so I gotta give you this. It's never been on a judge to say. The judge is able to, that's why they're a judge. Because their job is to weigh. It's like a scale. It's like I'm weighing. So the scale, if you look at it, when it goes from side to side, it has the ability to go from extreme to one extreme. Okay. And I'm really saying this so people really understand what's happening. Okay. Not trying to give the judge a scapegoat. I'm just really so y'all understand. Y'all are not reading the room correctly. The judge has the ability to say yay or nay or maybe. And so you understand they have the pendulum. They're able to swing the pendulum. They're able to say, That's why they got that little gravel thing and be like, bam, this is it. I just need y'all to really understand that. Because I think y'all think a judge works for y'all. This is why I highly doubt this. I mean, we'll see what the appellate court comes up with. But I don't know. My spirit doesn't necessarily say it's gonna go the way people think it's gonna go. And I need people to understand that. It could. You might have a liberal judge in there and been like, nope, swing it the other way because that's within the scope of their rights. But it's on the judge. It's very dependent on the judge in this situation. So let's hope Karmelo has a liberal judge. When I say liberal, like a liberal, like meaning like shit, I don't care. I'm within the scope of my means and I'm gonna go all the way left. Versus one that says, okay, I'm within the scope of my means and I'm gonna go all the way right and I'm gonna keep it the same. So y'all gotta know what y'all talking about. Reality of it is this may not go in the way that folks are hoping it will go. Um, I think it's very important too. I know that people want to talk about news and they want to keep everything relevant and stuff. But when you're striving to turn, this is just from my experience, and this is a tip from me to you. When you are striving to turn negative energy into something else, or when you're trying to transmute energy, let's put it that way, your best bet is to shut up. Nobody know how you moving. So all these people reporting on this dude and his family and everybody else should be moving in silence. So when we're talking about things like, okay, the prosecutor asked that certain items were blocked from the public, hell yeah. If I'm winning, if I'm fighting my case, bro, I need all the noise to shut the fuck up because my goal is to turn nothing into something. Do you understand what I'm saying? Even if it's something, you're turning that something into more of a something. You want to turn your silver into gold, your bronze into gold. So, one of the biggest things you don't do is you don't tell people what your next move is. You don't tell people what you're going to do. So all this press release shit, that shit's crazy. If it was me, y'all better just shut up. We just gonna have to be quiet. Because what we're not gonna do is get ahead of ourselves and all them people that want to see us fail are watching us. No, you leave them people in suspense so that they don't know. When you're dealing with court stuff, you best believe your bottom dollar. You better not say shit. When the attorneys are telling you not to say nothing, you better not say nothing. I don't care if you innocent or guilty. You want the pendulum to swing in your direction. So if it was me, okay, all right, cool. Y'all want to talk all this shit in the public? All right, cool. If I have to speak in public, if I have to, you best believe I ain't finna cry. I ain't showing need. This is war. We ain't crying. You understand what I'm saying? You ain't about to get none of my vulnerability. If you and I are going to court and it's my son we talking about, hell no, I ain't crying in front of y'all. I ain't sweat. I'm never gonna let the other side see me sweat, whether my son was guilty or not. If I decided to fight for my son, I'm gonna fight for my son. You understand what I'm saying? Don't matter how I feel. My tears don't fucking matter. You understand me? There's certain ways to deal with when you're in warfare, you're at war. Nobody gives a fuck about your tears. Unless you're able to turn them tears into results, there's no need to cry. Not on camera. So I want to be clear about something. the prosecution, while black people are sitting here saying, "Oh, well, they did this and they were making sure that he didn't have a fair trial." Listen, if I'm going to court and I'm going to win, because again, there's two parents involved, more like four, right? But y'all get what I'm saying. There's two sets of families involved, and each family has a stake in their son. You understand what I'm saying? Who am I to tell the Metcalfs? Even though I don't like that man, I don't like him. I really believe he's racist as hell. Who am I to tell him that he shouldn't fight for his son? All these families that you see fighting for their sons when they doing criminal, that's technically expected of a family, right? That's expected of your mom and your dad. Now, I don't know that I would do the same thing. I ain't been put in them situations, but I can understand why those things are being done. I'm a mom. I don't know. So I feel like my integrity is more than that. But I don't know that I would sell out my kid either. I don't give a fuck. I don't know that that's, especially when you know your kid and you know the thoughts of a kid and you know, okay, well, this person may or may not have meant it, stuff like that. Like, there's so much that goes on the intimacy side that is like, I don't know that I would sell out my own kid. I would like to think I would hold them accountable, but I don't. That's serious. I don't know what I would do. But it can only be expected of a parent to protect their kid. Bottom line, right or wrong. You understand? That's the expectation. You get what I'm saying? So in that case, if I'm looking at it from a parent aspect, let's say for example, let's say the McCaffs were innocent. Let's say it's exactly how folks are saying it on the right side of things. Let's say that's exactly how that happened. Everything I would think that folks are saying that didn't let Carmelo have a fair trial. Well, if you understand how litigation works, you can understand why things were done the way that, and if you understand how warfare works, because that's key. This wasn't a trial. This was war. This is how the father put it. Told you could pull up anytime you want. Like, nigga, pull up. Shit. White man wasn't playing, low key. And don't like him. I don't agree with him. I don't know that he would have done anything if you pulled up at his doorstep, but he might have. Shit, ain't no telling. I wouldn't put past him. Then again, I wouldn't put the other past him either. So what I will say is he had a little bit more knowledge than the Carmelo Anthony family, which is sad. It sucks. He definitely had a lot more pull, but we can't say that that was something that was used because the judge is refusing to recuse himself. You understand what I'm saying? The judge was like, you know what, I'll recuse myself. Then we could say, yup, there was a technicality. The judge is doubling down and saying, nah, uh, I said what I said. I meant what I said. It's going to the appellate courts. Y'all do what y'all do. You feel what I'm saying? The judge is really just saying, no, I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I did my job. And within the scope of technicality, again, that could be possibly true. So I need y'all to really be aware of the reality versus what the hell people are talking about, like our feelings. Again, right or wrong, there's definitely, we really got to look at this. Like, I don't know. I just find it hard to believe that the storyline is that bad, let alone now you got judges that are going rogue and they're just doing whatever and just don't care, because the consequences for that, I would think, are extreme. You understand what I'm saying? So I don't believe as much, even when I didn't like my daughter's father. Like, there's a lot of situations I'd have been through where, well, not a lot. One. One specific situation. I didn't really like the judge. I thought the judge was crazy, stupid, to be quite frank. But I also knew the judge had the ability to rule in the manner that she did based upon the scope in which she had to judge from. Not only that, when you guys go online, I would advise anybody that's dealing with courts and judges and stuff like that, if you care about the outcome of your case, you better be paying attention to how that judge rules often. And every judge has something online. Believe it or not, some of them don't, depends, but a lot of them do, where you can go online and you could see how they typically rule. And it is usually graded on a scale, okay? And I think that's the government, that's like the state's way of making sure they got judges that are fair, okay? You can always see that online before you even go in front of a judge. You can always see who your judge is. You should be. If you can't, I mean, I'm sorry. That just is technology with your state, but most states should have that option. I know we do here. So if I'm going in front of a court, I could see how the judge typically moves. I could tell if the judge is going to move liberal or if they're going to move, more conservative. And a lot of times you can kind of gauge, that's really where you need to start, is figuring out who your judge is and move and strategize based upon that. So I'm putting it out there, y'all. I, I'm letting y'all know right now. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. And I'm not following. I don't have enough time to follow the case. If I had time on my hands, I probably could, but I don't care. Okay. And that may sound rude or not rude, but I'm gonna need some of y'all to understand this case may not go the way y'all think it's gonna go. And with that said, my heart genuinely goes out to Karmelo. Period. Period. Um, and that's all I gotta say on the matter. So let me know what y'all think down in the comments below. With that being said, I'm out. Peace.